Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat Five segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. So as per scheduling kerfluffles, we have a fun show today. So Chris has a hard out in 20 minutes. Depending on how much I edit this, it might be one question, then he's gone.
22 minutes.
22 minutes. And Eric is in the back of a car recording. So we're just a bunch of misfit toys right now. But Eric's finally back on the show. Let's just jump into it because Chris has to get the hell out of here. So last time we started off with less controversial takes and just kind of questions that I've wanted to ask people on Big Fat Five just to get drummers' opinions, and it never really fits the vibe. So now I'm going to. As a drummer, if you could change one thing about your playing, what would it be? Chris, go ahead.
I think something that would really help me is confidence and just getting into the zone quicker during a set, meaning that I always kind of feel shaky like songs 1 and 2, and then by 3 I'm starting to relax and get more into the zone and stop worrying about being so precise playing to a click and playing to every single part that's on the record, and just kind of be more laid back and like in the moment of the show.
And I kind of alluded to this a few episodes ago when I was talking about, maybe it was last drum panel, like intent, setting my intent for not so much the day, which I do, but I actually do lately. I've been setting an intent for the show on just something to focus on. Usually it's playing less, but do you guys ever do that? Like today I'm going to extra focus on this just to see if this improves my playing.
I don't really, no.
Okay. so I'm weird. Awesome.
Well, I'll have moments where I will tell myself to improvise more. I'll do that. Where like I'll realize, I've played the same fill 5 nights in a row. Let me see if I can switch it up.
Sure.
I feel like the band that I play with, there's really not a lot of room to do that. So it's just kind of, I have to just basically play the part, and that's it.
Is it because Matt's a tyrant and you're calling him out right now?
No, but I think just for the kind of music we play, and especially playing to some backing tracks and stuff, there's really not a lot of room to come off of what is on the record and to play anything different than what the live show usually has. I mean, it's not like if I miss a bass drum hit or something, or I can add an extra crash cymbal, it's not going to be detrimental to the show, but I really can't vary as much as, like, I'm going to play a simpler show tonight, or I'm going to add more fills in or chops. It's kind of pretty middle of the road with maybe a little bit of sparkle on either side, you know?
It seems that Matt I've only seen a handful of shows of Winnetka, but it seems like Matt is very much into moving his body with drum parts that he knows and fills that are going to come up. He's very much like does little dances around it. So I'm assuming if you do something different, he's like, dude, it doesn't work with what I want to do anymore.
Well, it's funny because there actually has been some new fills and new parts that have come up through the years, just of older songs. You just kind of get bored of them, and then it'll be something that I'll mess around with sound check, or maybe I will mess around with it at a show, and then it becomes part of the show.
Yeah, to go back to the question, I would say my answer would be to commit to parts more. Like when I'm writing with people or even just live, I'll do something for a verse and then I will not then repeat it every 2 bars. Like I have a tendency to not gain the audience's trust of here's the groove, here's how you're going to establish it. Now how can you make me believe that groove just by staying there? I always end up having to move stuff around, or I get bored, or I get insecure that the part's not good enough, and so I move it around, which is hard for songwriters to latch on to what I'm trying to do. And that's not just in a live sense, but like I said, when I'm writing with people, sometimes I wish I had more conviction to be like, here's what I'm doing, let's just be in this together. Instead, I'm so ADD about everything. Because when I listen to some grooves, I'm like, oh, I'm really laying this down. And then I listen back and I'm like, you played 3 measures of that and then you moved on. Like, I don't even know what's going on. So yeah, have a little more conviction and just sticking to the point, I guess, which is how I talk anyways. I'm so all over the place. But yeah, I think you guys are great drummers, and I hope I'm a good drummer. So I think we're doing okay. But that's what I would change for sure.
Good is right. Yeah, I have 15 minutes.
All right. This is kind of, I guess, on the same line of the last question, but what's something you wish you could tell your younger drumming self?
Wear earplugs.
Like going to shows or playing drums or all the above?
All of the above. I think wearing in-ear monitors definitely saved my hearing from going completely deaf. The other thing I would probably say, is the idea of maybe taking some theory a little more seriously. Because when I was younger, I played in just punk rock bands, and it was just play as hard and fast and as aggressive and loud, and not really work on counting and transitions, and not hit a crash cymbal every 30 seconds and fills, just more grooving. And so I would say like hearing protection, grooving, theory, and maybe playing a smaller drum set.
Yeah, I think for me, I would maybe go in a more business route decision. Like, I feel like I was too scared to jump into multiple projects early on in my career and really kind of put all my eggs into like one or two baskets. And I think I've had a lot more fun in recent years just kind of jumping into anyone who's asked me to play. So, I've always kind of been really excited by multiple genres of music. I studied classical music in college and did all kinds of world music stuff. So really jumping in on a professional level with a bunch of different artists has been really fun for me. So I wish I'd done that sooner. And then to follow up, for sure, earplugs. I'm doubling up on that one. Stressing it.
2 sets of earplugs, you're saying?
Yeah, multiple earplugs, all the earplugs.
You said doubling up, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, next time be a little more clear, Eric. That really pissed me off.
If you wear 2 sets of earplugs, it's way more effective. That's
interesting. Oh, if you go watch me play live and you wear 2 sets of headphones, I sound a lot better.
Exactly.
But my answer will tie into the follow-up question. But me, I wish I didn't, as a younger drummer, give so much shits about how I look when I play drums, meaning like my drums setup. I spent so much time and probably developed such bad habits based on just the way I hold my sticks and maybe the way my wrists go, with how I was so focused on the aesthetics of my drum set. And I now, if you look at my drums, yeah, my toms are relatively straight. I mean, that's a whole nother, we already go back to a previous episode on why my neuroses can't get rid of that. But now my cymbals are different angles. They're all different levels. I used to have like both my crashes have to be the same. I spent so much, my blood pressure definitely was affected in a negative way on how much I would worry about the aesthetics of everything. I wish I would just tell myself that your favorite drummers that you just grew up listening to, the Hal Blaines, the Levon Helms, the Jim Gordons, they didn't care how they looked. They just wrote and played good songs and good drum parts. And I still deal with that. I still deal with, like, I set things up differently, and then as I'm walking to the green room, I'll take that, little look back and be like, doesn't look as cool today, and I don't know why. And that would actually go to my next topic, which is, what role do aesthetics and how important are they to a drummer's success and vibe and the way people view them when you see them live? I'll go with Eric first.
This is something that I have quite a bit to say about this one.
You have 10 minutes.
I get in trouble all the time on social media for doing a bunch of stick tricks and kind of goofing off on stage. And I always say that kind of thing plays into, it's the same way as like how you dress on stage, what finish your kit is. I think the aesthetics, whether we like to admit it or not, are an important factor in what we do. In terms of a live show, obviously if you're in a studio, don't be tossing your sticks around. No one can appreciate the finish of your drum kit when you're playing in the studio. But yeah, I mean, to me, aesthetics and art is like a massive factor. You look at any artist, David Bowie, Elton John, the way that they present themselves matter. And I think that is relatively the same for drummers as well.
I agree. I mean, I dance when I play drums a lot, especially with cannons. I am moving. I mean, there's so many times I'll watch a video and I'll ask the band, like, am I ridiculous? And they'll be like, no, they love it because I'm not trying to be too cool for school. I'm trying to be opposite. Like, have a good time. Why would you pay $90,000 for front row tickets and be, sitting with your arms crossed in the front row. Like, let's have a good time. So that's why I encourage people to do it. What about you, Chris?
I agree with what both you guys say. I've actually developed like a weird thing during my live shows now where I pretend to be a robot.
Yes, I love your aesthetic. I'm obsessed with it.
But it's a weird thing for me. Like, it kind of started off as a goof, and then now I notice that my aesthetic of pretending to be a robot and just play as stiff as possible and just try to make people laugh in the front row kind of goes back to my answer a couple of minutes ago about maybe getting into the zone quicker and getting out of my head. And now I kind of judge my shows not on the playing, but on how much robot I could do during the show, because it kind of distracts me from everything else, and it kind of calms my nerves, and maybe I'm not focusing on the click so much. I'm just trying to like have a good time. And I don't know if this really answers the initial question, but I think when you go see a drummer and their aesthetic is cool, it's almost that 1% factor that like famous people have, or like really cool musicians, where it's like almost unexplainable why it's polarizing and why you want to watch them. I don't know. I've gone to shows where I don't even know the band, and I'm like captured by the drummer, and there's like a smell in the air, and like he or she's like drum set is set up like super cool, and like there's a weird logo on the kick drum. There's just something polarizing where it like encompasses everything cool, and it's that 1% it factor, when like a casting director sees like an actor for the first time and they're like, oh, that person, either they have it or they don't have it. And it's like a cool drummer just has it. Like, it could be a giant piece of crap drum kit, but there's just something about it. Is it the playing? Is it the light? Is it the fog machine? Is it just, a cool haircut, a cool outfit? There's just something that the aesthetic of that is important.
I've said it before. I think authenticity is never cringy. And so as long as people believe that that what you're doing is an extension of something you want to do, or that you're embodying whatever you're doing, it works. Like Paul Newman, timeless classic when it comes to male style. And all he wore was just Oxford button-ups and like Sperry canvas shoes. But he just did it in this effortless style that just like you believed it. And he had, like what you said, Chris, that 1% where you're like, you always look cool in the most basic trends, but it's just timeless. So yeah, kind of an offshoot of what you were saying, but I agree. There is something about it that if you can make it work, it really does make a big difference.
I always say this stuff really boils down to taste. Like there's certain things that are not going to be everybody's vibe, everybody's aesthetics, especially talking about things like stick tricks. Like, that is not for everybody, and it's not something that I encourage everybody to do, certainly at every gig. To me, it's like you're not going to wear a suit to the punk rock gig, or you're not going to wear, cut off jean shorts to the jazz dinner club gig. I think it's just about recognizing that the way that we present ourselves always matters, and to really just have fun with it. I feel like I have so many conversations where people take drumming so seriously. Not to say that you shouldn't take your drumming seriously, but at the end of the day, like, this is something that we do for fun and to spread joy to people. I would be nervous if my surgeon was flipping his scalpels around, But for us, whatever, it's fine.
Hopefully I'm not aware when he's doing it. I hope I'm asleep at that point.
Also that. But yeah, I mean, just have fun, loosen up, get crazy, be weird, dance around.
I agree, and I've always, maybe this is like a Blink-182 thing they said way back in the day, but take what you do very seriously, but do not take yourself seriously. And that's kind of a mindset that I've always had. Do the job, do it well, but don't be so hard on yourself. And Chris has 2 minutes out, but I do want to say, kind of going into authenticity and cringiness, my next question is about drum sounds. And I don't know how to really word this, but what makes a drum sound timeless, and what makes something not timeless? And I'll let Chris go first, and then you can get the hell out of here to go be a good father.
I have like 6 minutes, like a hard 6 minutes.
Can you make it 5?
In the time we're in right now, I think that is a harder thing to achieve, because music is so quick now. I almost feel like music right now is not really timeless, so it's kind of hard. Maybe ever since Pro Tools became so mainstream, where it's so easy to get sounds and switch sounds. That's a really hard question. I think the timeless stuff came before this modern music that we're in right now. I think when the song is kind of timeless, then the drums are timeless with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say, gun to my head, timeless means what you would hear if you were in the room with the instrument, you know? So like there's not a lot of stuff going on, not a lot of external influence. So like hearing a bop kit is always kind of gonna be timeless. Yes, you might not like jazz, but you can make a jazz record that sounds like it's from the 50s if the drums just open and the player's playing it and it sounds like you're in like an old smoky jazz club. But then, I don't know, I'm kind of being my own devil's advocate because, you know, in the 90s with those, like I'm thinking of like the Stained drum sound. Nothing against Stained, that's just the first thing I thought about. And maybe that's even early 2000s, but like that kind of wide open, ringy snare, that's also what you would hear if you were in a room with a wide open drum set played that way, but I wouldn't consider the 90s drum sound timeless. I guess, yes, we do both work. That Founder is here for Big Fat Snare Drum, so I would say like the Rumors drum sound is timeless because it doesn't piss anyone off. So maybe that's what I would say. If a drum sound doesn't piss anyone off, and anyone, going back to what Mark said last week about just like the Amazon delivery guy, if he's like, no, it sounds cool. If everyone would say that, maybe that's what constitutes timeless. Am I just talking in circles? Eric, please save me.
Man, this is such a tough one. I kind of agree with what Chris was saying about how,
damn it,
I think it depends on the song. The song sets the pace for how timeless a drum song is. No disrespect to Stain, but I don't know that they're going to be one of the artists that is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll put it that way, you know. But
put it another way too, just for fun.
Oh geez.
No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, I mean, like Rumors is a perfect example. Like that's one of those albums that just people are going to listen to forever. It's a timeless album, and therefore those drum sounds are timeless. To go to 90s, I think drummers reference, what's the Deftones song? You know, everyone talks about the is it My Own Summer?
My Own Summer, yeah.
Yeah, I think people will reference that kind of drum sound forever. I mean, Abe Cunningham has a stranglehold on a specific drum sound. But yeah, I think ultimately it comes down to the artist and the songs being timeless, and then the drum tones kind of follow with that.
Maybe just not abrasive drum sounds that are fitting to the song.
And going back to what you mentioned, Brody Simpson, he talks about, let's see if I can word this correctly, and Chris, you might have to leave mid-thought.
I have to go mid-thought. I'm gonna stop my thing right now.
Okay, well, Chris, we love you, buddy. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Bye, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
But yeah, it was like, it's fine if you know what you don't like about a record. If someone's listening to a record and they're like, I know I don't like the snare sound, so then I can just move past it. But if there's a record and they're like, I don't know what I don't like about this, but I just don't like it, then that's a bad sign. So sometimes it's okay to be not timeless as long as you can double down and be like, I just like this. I'm not sure if this is making any sense, but it's okay to be not timeless as long as you have conviction and people know it's like, oh, that was a choice.
Sure. I mean, maybe the polarizing aspect is what makes something stand out and then become timeless. I think we'll probably reference the Saint Anger snare sound for the rest of time. Whether people hate it or love it, like, I would say that's probably a timeless drum sound. You know?
I guess by definition, because there's no time that would work, so it's timeless.
Fair point. Yeah.
Do you think we've lost the ability to have a popular song that has drums in it that is void of a click?
I feel like people who always complain about the overuse of things like click track wouldn't be able to tell if something was, unless it's really dramatic. Like if someone has just really killer, near perfect metronomic time, we wouldn't notice that it's not gridded to a click track, you know?
Yeah.
But with that said, I do think this is something that I sort of struggle with, and I wonder if a general audience is just so used to hearing perfection all the time, and that maybe imperfection doesn't do as well to a general public. I'm not sure.
It's weird because there was this Brian Blade quote that I'll paraphrase and butcher like I always do, but he talks about how sometimes those mistakes, like a missed Stuart Copeland rim shot, or this time when you can tell the drummer's keeping time with his hi-hat, like at the beginning of Song for the Dead, where the guitar and the hi-hat start to have some serious rub with them.
Yes.
That becomes the part of the record that you look forward to in a weird way. I think people have a visceral response to it, but people are afraid to, and I'll be the first to say when I'm doing the intros of this podcast, or if I pluralize something that I didn't mean to, I will literally go back and re-record it and put it in to where people don't even realize. I mean, so much editing goes behind the releasing of these episodes that I don't want to admit how much hours I spent. But anyways, I think humanity is something that people do appreciate and love, but it's like in friendships, the first thing you want from a friendship is vulnerability, but it's the last thing you want to offer to someone, you know?
Wow.
And it's the same thing goes with music, at least personally.
That was like a mic drop moment right there. That was nice.
Oh, I'll probably cut it out. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess genre specific, like always, we're trying to have these big conversations and not be nuanced about it, because there's still, nowadays, you also have to think of the only way to make money in this damn industry is live performances. And so when you're recording songs, is everyone on this recording going to be in the live show, or are we going to have to supplement some backing tracks? And so because of that, should we record this onto a click so that we can have the stems, that we can then line it up live? I mean, it's not just about how do I want to express myself in this record. You have to think of the whole industry entity of this song as a whole.
Yeah, there's also the aspect of younger up-and-coming musicians without a ton of resources. You know, it's easier to go into the studio and record things to a click, where it's easier to line things up if something goes wrong. Like if you have really limited budget and therefore very limited studio time, it's going to be way easier on your wallet to have everything lined up to a click, so edits are quick and easy as you're recording. You know, I'm sure we would all love to sit there and play until we have the perfect take, but sometimes that's not realistic depending on budget or even skill level. You know, I think younger up and coming bands, if they have to grid things, so be it.
All right, so this next one is interesting and it's scary, but I'm just going to read the prompt here. So the future of drumming in a world of AI and automation. With AI and automation on the rise, what is the future of drumming? Could AI ever replace human drummers, or is there something inherently irreplaceable about the human touch in drumming? I can go first, or if you have a response immediately, please go ahead.
I'm inherently not worried about AI. I'm just not worried about AI replacing artists. I went to the Art Institute in Chicago a few weeks ago and just was walking around, you know, admiring all these incredible paintings and sculptures. Like, I just kept thinking to myself, how did they do this? And I think that at the end of the day is what people really appreciate about art. It's about how just a quote unquote regular person can transform nothing into something. And I think ultimately that's the thing that makes people excited. And when it's done by a computer or by AI, I think that's less exciting and it takes away the value of the art itself. And I don't think people are going to be jamming the new AI record. It's not something that I'm worried about. In terms of if it's going to replace drumming, I don't necessarily believe that either. I think we've been in a place where people have been using, you know, software to cut corners on hiring a studio drummer anyways. You know,
yeah.
I think the industry's kind of been in a place where, you know, especially like things like jingle sessions aren't really a thing anymore. So we've been in a place where that's kind of a thing. And I don't foresee it becoming more of a thing. I think you will still need, at the end of the day, a human to put together a drum part, whether it's a producer or whether it's a drummer in the studio.
Yeah, I think I might disagree with you on that. I think in certain ways, here's my thought process. So I have a TD-27, which is like the second from the highest level Roland drum set, and I use Superior Drummer 3 to replace a lot of my sounds. And while I can still in some ways tell when I listen back, obviously I can tell because I did it, but where they've come in the last 4 or 5 years with the technology and the libraries and the ability to mimic a drummer's feel and not just have the samples go loud to soft, but also like if you hit a snare drum at a certain velocity, it reacts, the membrane of the shell or the head reacts with the shell in a different way, that it's not just a louder note, it's a different tone of a note. They're getting so good at that. And I've heard the MIDI drums, AI make drum parts via Superior Drummer. And maybe when it comes to the metal stuff and really busy stuff, you can kind of tell. But when it comes to the softer stuff, these ghost notes and these dynamics are getting so good that I don't know if in 10 years the session drummer, and I'm thinking of like the Aaron Sterlings, maybe he'll, like those kind of drummers will still have a stronghold on the creativity and their vibes. But it's so hard, like being a session drummer. I mean, I was thinking about this with like lighting designers and stuff. I mean, eventually you'll just be able to put in your song into a software and be like, here's how many lighting options we have. Here's the time. Might not even be able to need time, whatever. Time code is what I'm saying. I don't know enough about the lighting industry, but it's like they're going to be able to automate all that stuff for all these designers of these things and drummers. It kind of is going to be almost obsolete. I will say this, that I think that when it comes to live drumming, I'm not worried at all when it comes to AI, and usually that's where any of the money is these days. As a drummer, is being on tour and playing live. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I think pretty soon it'll be so good technology-wise that people can just put in their song and be like, type into ChatGPT or whatever version of that would be on the music side of things, and just be like, here's this, and they'll give them an option of a drum part, and they'll be like, we'll change this in this bridge, or give me 5 options, 5 different takes for the bridge, but keep everything else the same, and maybe add a ghost note here. I don't know. I think it'll be so easy to just mimic the human condition in the studio. And I'm not saying I'm excited about this or happy about this, but I've just seen how far technology has gone as someone who's really interested in it over the last 3 years, and just the exponential growth of it. It's scary in a way, but I also don't necessarily think I find as much enjoyment from, I don't know, just the whole session drummer thing has never really been something that's tickled my fancy. I've always preferred live aspects or being involved in a project that I love personally. So it doesn't really scare me, because that's not taking away a job that I enjoy anyways, but I don't know.
Well, I 100% get where you're coming from. And I do think it interestingly enough ties back to what we were talking about with the click track, where I do think AI could potentially be like a really great resource for someone who is a singer-songwriter and can't hire a session drummer. And it's tough for me to be like, oh, well, you should find a budget. And, and then, who knows, maybe their incredible song never comes out because they can never afford a session drummer. But with that said, I think in an ideal world, people will always want to be inspired and work with another human. So maybe I'm being overly optimistic. But I will say, I think at the very least, I can imagine this in sort of a pendulum, like the pendulum swinging dramatically in the other direction at some point.
Is the pursuit of perfection, like what we're talking about, is that killing live energy? Meaning like live takes, say a singer, the take is so emotional, but they're a little flat. Or a drummer the part is so, going back to the same word, emotional and primal, but maybe they would have done a few things differently. Are we not allowing those takes to be the take anymore? And I would say yes. In pop music, I think when it comes to certain takes, I think that some people are afraid because there's so little money in music right now. And part of me thinks I'm talking out of my ass, because half the times I'm listening to myself and I'm like, shut the hell up, dude. You don't know what you're talking about. Because I don't listen to as much music as some people that probably should be talking about this. But yeah, I feel that sometimes, even if there's something for me, if I'm about to send to someone, I love the take, but I know that there were some choices I made that they're probably not going to want to go with. And so I go with a more tame take that might not have that same energy, because that's probably what's going to piss less people off.
Sure. Yeah, man, it's a really tough one. I mean, it's like I was saying earlier, I think audiences now expect a certain level of perfection. Going back to something like Studio Drummer, it's like now everyone has access to the best sounding drums from the best sounding studios. So now everyone's drum sound can be perfect. So is there a reason to go out of your way to record in a studio and make it not perfect. It's, you know, it has to be like a conscious choice almost to be like, hey, I'm going to make something that's not perfect. I think it is an interesting argument you could make that pursuing perfection now is not only easier, but it's more reliable and the safer option. And maybe less people are seeking imperfection.
I just listened back on some of those old records and knowing that was an entire take, or someone painstakingly going through a tape and slicing or, you know, splicing it up. But it makes me so insecure as a player now, because I'm like, man, you actually had to be a really good musician back in the day to cut a hit record. The musicianship isn't almost as important anymore. Now it is the creativity that will make you stand out. It's not being an amazing musician. It's, are you doing something that's different? And you can make it marketable easily, quote unquote easily, but it's almost creativity is more important.
Yeah, man. But the flip side is, you know, this kind of ties back to the conversation that we had probably in the first episode about how someone like Ringo doesn't have as many shoulders to stand on. Each generation raises the bar of musicianship as we progress further in time. You know, going back to someone like Tyler, the Creator, hip hop has been around way longer than hip hop from the 80s, you know, the 90s, right? So there's a lot more inspiration to draw from. I do agree that I think creativity is probably the big factor, but I also think that the bar for musicianship is also going to raise as we get further in time. I mean, like, even just going on Instagram and opening it up and being like, oh, here's this 12-year-old that's absolutely shredding. You know, there's more access to becoming a better musician now than there ever has been. It's almost like there's less excuse. Like, you have to be a good musician, and then you also have to be really creative. But I mean, maybe I'm too optimistic, but at the end of the day, I kind of choose to believe that I think the cream will always rise to the top. The people that are doing something really interesting and really creative and are technically proficient will always find their way through a career. I hope, at least. Otherwise,
I hope so too.
I'm screwed.
Well, me too. And going back to Ringo, it makes me think, and maybe we talked about this before, but a lot of people have said, yes, Ringo's a great drummer, but he was playing on great songs, and that's why he's known as Ringo. And I would like to think that Ringo, if he was with other great artists nowadays and still played the exact same way, he would still stand out in a unique way. But it makes me think how many drummers are like Ringo that are so creative, but they just never found the band that allows them to be their own version of Ringo. How many different music multiverses are out there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a truly scary thought.
And I think about, in almost a narcissistic way, could you and me, in our own way, be a Ringo? I mean, we're both successful in our own rights. I'm not tearing down our own careers by any means, but like, have we just not found? Because I personally feel, and I can't speak for you, that I haven't necessarily found the band that's just like, this is the avenue exactly of how I want to play drums. It's the expression. I can be myself. Really, when I listen back, I'm like, that's me on that recording. I don't think I've ever been a part of a project like that, and that's my own doing, probably out of insecurity or whatever. But I wonder if I just haven't found my Beatles yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting perspective, you know. But you know what? It also kind of ties into, I think the conversation you had last time with Mark was really interesting about a drummer's role in the songwriting process. I feel like the way that I experience songwriting with Marina City is, I think a drummer can offer something creatively to inspire what happens in the rest of the song. You know, like that doesn't always happen, you know, for the record. But I think when we talk about someone like Ringo, I see him as a songwriter in the Beatles because who knows what would have happened to any of those songs if Ringo played a different beat or something more straightforward, you know, something more quote unquote acceptable for a drummer to play. You know, like I think his sort of out there drum parts really added a level of songwriting and inspiration for the other guys to write the best song possible. So I guess what I'm getting at is I wonder if being a member of a band is never really going to be exactly what you envision, because what you bring to the table creatively inspires the creative process in something else, in someone else. So it's like, you know, like we always joke in Marina City is that I bring my Nine Inch Nails influence, and then my singer brings his Backstreet Boys influence, and then we kind of meet in the middle. So like I would ideally maybe like to be writing Nine Inch Nails music, but it's always going to have a tinge of NSYNC to it. So
sure.
So it's you know,
both great bands.
And yeah, and I love that about my band. So I wonder if that's, you know, unless you're writing something completely solo, if it's always going to be just a little bit pulled in a certain direction.
Yeah, and I love Mark, and I'm not disagreeing with him. This is kind of a separate statement from the, you know, me, whether I'm agreeing with him or not, because I think we definitely hashed it out in that episode.
Oh yeah, same.
But it's like silent letters in words, you know. It's like they still mean a lot, and they still change the word. And there was a guy I used to work with, and his phrase was "enjoy the kill." And in that meaning, like when you're, say, this is coming from like a songwriter's perspective, if you're starting an idea from from scratch yourself, where say you get inspired by a guitar riff or a synth line or something, and that's the reason you start wanting to work on this idea, and then you work on it for an hour, few days, months, it becomes something, and for some reason you're like, God, this isn't going. This feels muddy, or this feels too whatever, insert whatever reason why you might not like it. Sometimes enjoy the kill, meaning go back to that original idea and mute that synth line. And then sometimes it's like, oh, the song became this, but I was so attached to this initial idea. I'm like, well, that's the song. I got to keep that in there. So sometimes something that doesn't even make the final version of the idea was the original spark of it, but it's not part of it anymore, kind of like a silent letter in a word. And just because it's not there anymore, aka a drum thing or something you did that wasn't even the final drum part, but you did something that, like you said, inspired it to go a certain direction. I don't know. Yeah, it is a gray area, because sometimes accenting a hi-hat on the E of 3 would spark him to do this, you know, like a Paul Simon emotive vocal thing that becomes almost a hook in the song. You know, it's like, it's so contextual, and so it's so hard. But I don't even know which question got us to this, but it is a very crazy thing. All I did was say hi, Eric, but
yeah, I know. Where do we go?
Exactly. Yeah.
That was the initial idea. Hi, Eric, and then.
All right, how about this? I don't know how we're going to answer this as two drummers, but why are we as drummers so obsessed with being so busy?
Why is every drummer in like 18 bands?
well, yeah. I guess that's another way to look at it. I meant as players. Like when we're playing,
sure, yeah.
Why do most drummers always have to fill up? Like, why do we have to fill up space when it's probably objectively easier for the most part to play less? And we acknowledge we probably sound better when we play less. Drummers play way too many ghost notes. We all admit it. We all do too many open hi-hats at the end of phrases. We all do too many different stupid bullshit stuff on the hi-hat that we don't need to do. Why?
This goes back to the very first question you asked me today. It's all about like the thing that I admire about so many drummers is their ability to just accept space. And this is all my anxieties we're hitting on right now.
You're fidgeting, I can tell.
I know, I'm like pacing.
Yeah, you're sweating a lot, Eric.
But no, I think the unique thing about drums is that every sound we make, with the exception of like a crash cymbal or a ride cymbal, is very short. And it's something that I'm conscious of when I'm teaching and when I'm talking to students about reading music. You'll look on a page for a snare drum piece and say it has quarter notes. When we play quarter notes on a snare drum, those are not true quarter notes that any other instrument would play, right? Like if you're playing trumpet, if you're playing guitar, if you're playing bass, those quarter notes are going to be ba, 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 right? They're going to last a full beat. On a snare drum, it's just the quick tap. It's the short, you look at the waveform and it's just a little blip.
Yeah, hey, listen to me play a 64th note.
But yeah, I mean, that's the sort of unique thing about drums, and I think that us as drummers get really self-conscious about how short our our sound is. We get lost. It's
Note envy.
Yeah, we get note envy.
Yeah, I think that's the answer.
We did it.
That's impressive. And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using Isotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at isotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye!